Our conversation with Bob Pollock from the Extension Service is brought to you on behalf of Marcus and Mack, a law firm representing injured people. Mr. Pollock is on the line with us this morning. You can give him a call at 479-1160 if you have a question. Bob, good morning.
Good morning.
It's good to have you with us here today. One of the questions that I had, since there was no in-person state farm show this year, and no, the question is not about the butter sculpture. I know they were encouraging everybody to make their own. But my question had to do with when you're at the farm show, there are actual seminars and other things that go on besides having a great big old farm party. And so did you miss any of those sorts of activities because this year's was all virtual, or did you actually attend some?
No, there was nothing.
Oh, yeah?
Everything that did occur would have pretty much occurred virtually.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure there were, because there's a lot of organizations that meet around that time. Just a lot of events and things that go on that just weren't able to happen. They actually did a town hall type meeting with the Secretary of Ag and the Dean of the College of Ag Sciences at Penn State, and they did that, but that was all done virtually.
Everything was virtual. That's no fun. That's just no fun at all.
No, you
can't even get an ice cream cone.
Yeah, no. Although I did see where. Oh, I'm trying to remember what organization it was.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I think it was the Potato Growers Association. I think they actually teamed up with some local retail establishments, and they were selling their potato donuts or one of their products, and they must have made them and then they distribute them through those retail outlets. So they were trying to be creative and do what they could do, because I mean pretty much all that fundraising that's done and all those commodities that are sold, the money from that after expenses pretty much all goes towards research projects.
Yeah, and it's awful tough to do that with no money.
Yep.
All right. Hey, I wanted to ask you about potatoes, as a matter of fact, because we're getting toward the end of January. People are thinking about their gardens and everything, and maybe they're thinking about planting potatoes, but they're living off. A lot of people are living off of the potatoes that they grew last year, and they're down in the potato cellar, which has been kept nice and cool and dark if they're doing it right. But still, they get those white little eyes on them, and they grow and look like tiny little dumpling octopuses. What are the ways there, or what is the way to properly handle that? Do you go break those things off, and is there a way to preserve their firmness without them getting all pruny and soft?
Yeah. So when that starts to happen, then that means that the conditions for storage are not quite right.
Mm-hmm.
So it's either too warm, is probably mostly the case. It's just not quite cold enough. And so those buds have been conditioned long enough that even if it's dark, they're starting to grow and sprout. And so really that's what's happening under the ground.
Yeah, it's dark there too.
Potatoes. Yeah, those eyes in there, those little dimples in there. That's where the growth starts to come out of those, and then that's what makes the stem. The stem starts to grow out of that, and then if it's planted in the soil, then those stems are going to come up through the soil and then make the branches of the plant. So that's what's happening. They're actually starting to grow. So you can just try to get the temperatures, if everything's in the dark, try to get the temperatures down if you can. Otherwise, you can just knock those sprouts off, because if you leave them on there too long, that plant's growing. So it's actually using the stored energy in that tuber to grow those sprouts. And so the potato is going to continue to shrink and become unusable, essentially.
It's literally sacrificing its own body for its
Yes.
children.
Yeah.
For its little potato children, which is
That's
a very praiseworthy thing, but is not very tasty. So we think about our potato crops. Let's think about some other things that as we are preparing for gardening season, which is a couple of months off still, are there things that we should be doing right now in terms of starting plants if we want to do that, or building hot boxes? What are the things that at the end of January real gardeners want to do?
Right, and definitely kind of laying things out. What kind of garden do you want to have this year? How big, how small? And then based on that square footage, what kinds of plants do you want to try to put in there? Are there things that you use more and things that are maybe shorter day crops that you can do double cropping or maybe even triple cropping on those shorter day plants?
You can do that you can do that with green beans, can't you?
Yes.
Yeah,
beans and beets, lettuces. So there's a lot of things that you might be able within 40 to 60 days time frame, do a whole crop, and then in the meantime, you've made reseedings along the way so that you have a consistent supply of those things you use the most. And then, of course, there's other plants that, like tomatoes, you'll grow for the whole season.
Mm-hmm.
But just doing some planning now of what you want, and then the different types. So, like with peppers, there's a multitude of different types of peppers, from mild to hot in size, shape, and colors. So how much you want to delve into that, and how many different types that you want to grow is another way to look at it also. But just do some planning on, okay, so how much seed do I need? And then you can go from there as far as getting that ordered, especially to get maybe specific varieties that you wanted. And then, of course, some people save seed, too, of certain things that are really either somebody's given to them over time or it's been handed down through the generations, and their job is to preserve that and keep it going for the next generation.
Let me ask you this question.
Those can all be done now.
I want to ask you this about when you're planning your garden and saying, I want to put tomatoes here, and I want to put cucumbers there, and I want to put this here or there. Are there, and I believe there are there plants you should not put next to each other because they're going to affect each other in some way?
Yes. So some of the vine crops, for instance, they take up so much space. So you have to be careful in those areas what you plant or interplant or plant beside that, because those vining crops will tend to just take over whatever space is there and may outcompete those smaller plants or plants that take up less footprint. Plants that grow vertically, like sweet corn, for instance, those can end up shading depending on the direction of your garden and how it's facing towards the sun. That could limit. You plant a few rows of corn, then that could shade, which could be a beneficial thing for certain things that maybe need a little bit of shade during the day, but other things may not do too well because they get too much shade because of those other plants growing there.
Yeah. Are there situations where one plant gives off some sort of chemical or some sort of substance that is going to inhibit the growth of something planted next to it?
Not so much that, but oftentimes we'll plant companion plants because those plants may be resistant or may repel maybe a pest.
Oh, okay.
So that's oftentimes we'll combine things, or maybe you'll have some flowers in there or something like that may either attract certain things or repel. certain insects.
So you could actually hire a bodyguard plant.
Yes. Yeah.
Somebody,
They call them banker plants in the greenhouse.
banker plants?
Yeah, banker plants. But they actually, and you can do this in a field situation too, or even in a garden situation, where, let's take cucumbers, for example. They are highly attracted by striped and spotted cucumber beetles. So you can actually plant a couple rows of cucumbers on the edge of the field, or the edge of the garden. Works better in a field situation. And then plant something else for a little piece, and then you can go back in and plant some more cucumbers, hoping that those will be attracted to that planting along the edge of the field, and then you can use that to scout there, and then when you see them, then you can treat them as necessary and only treat those plants, in hoping that they're pretty much staying on those. And they'll do that in the greenhouse too. They'll put a highly susceptible plant, maybe to botrytis or to powdery mildew, or again, it could be mites or aphids. And then that's the plant they go check, so they don't have to necessarily scout every plant in the greenhouse. They can go to these plants that are indicator plants, or that will get infected first if those pests show up, and so they can go and check one plant versus 1,000 and kind of know what's going on.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? This has been so fascinating. We ran right through our time frame.
Go figure. We do that all the time.
Plant talk. All right, Robert. Thank you so much for being with us again
you are
this morning.
welcome.
Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
It is the voice of Indiana County, WCCS. County, WCCS.